the ground for this, or the basis for this, is found in 1 Peter 3:15. It's not going to come up, but this is what it says, and I'm reading from the ESV. It says, "But in your heart, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense, an apologia, to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do this with gentleness and with respect." And so, the art of apologetics is really about giving a reasonable answer to people who ask a reasonable question of you about why you believe what you believe. And there are a myriad, countless amounts of questions, but some of them are really big and some of them have to do with what we're facing in culture right now. And so we are making an attempt to, in a nutshell, and I need you to understand that in a nutshell of a nutshell, unpack some of the contemporary issues that we're facing and issues that have come through the generations. Right? So now we're dealing with the issue of truth. Does absolute truth exist? And how do we communicate that to a world that is postmodern and has accepted a worldview called relativism? In other words, everything is relative. There's no such thing as truth. Truth doesn't exist. The only thing that is true is what you decide to be true for yourself. Right? How do we deal with that in a world? Right? How do we answer that? And how do we bring the Christian message in a world that completely rejects it because Jesus claims to be the way, the truth, and the life? So that's what we're dealing with tonight. And in reading this, and in preparing for this, I read a book called True Truth, and it's written by a guy named Art Lindsley. And I would suggest that if you can get that, you get it and you read it, right, as a follow-up to this message. But in his book, he said, in communication, there's always three messages, right? One, what I intend to say. Right? Two, what I actually say. And three, what you hear. Now, sometimes that can be a good thing for a preacher. What I intend to say and what I say might be two different things, and it might be better that I didn't say what I intended to say, all right? And what you hear might be correct. You know, I've had messages where we've preached on the holiness of God, or something more obscure, you know, the way Jesus is able to empower you in the workplace, and people come and they go, oh, I just know that I'm meant to get hold of my aunt and speak to her about that thing that I did years ago, you know, and just say sorry. And you're like, that has got nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do with what I shared tonight. But I'm glad that you got that and that God used. So that might happen, that does happen. And what I'm praying for tonight is that what I intend to say and what I do say and what you hear match up. But there's a chance that it won't. And so I want to just ask that you give incredible grace to me tonight and bear with me, right, as we unpack this massive topic. And we're really going to be talking about a pinprick of a pinprick on this issue, right? If you have a question, if something I say causes you to go, oh, hang on, wait, no, I don't, just write that question down so that it doesn't stop you from continuing the thought process with me. Just write it down and then come and ask me afterwards, so we can talk about that. Don't let it stop you. If you have any questions, write it down and come to me. And I do not profess to be an expert on this. I'm just incredibly passionate about apologetics and been doing some reading over the years, and it's really on my heart to have God's people equipped to be able to bring a reasonable answer to people. We don't have to be professors, we don't have to be scientists, we don't have to be doctors. We just have to be people who understand what truth is and in a very, very practical way learn how to communicate that to the world around us. So having said that, you can turn to the book of John, chapter 18. We're going to start in verse 33, but I'm going to pray quickly as we launch. Father, tonight I just want to pray that you would honor your word, that you would speak through me, and what you intend to say, I pray that that will be what I say, and what people hear, I pray, would impact their hearts and lives and challenge us and encourage us in the truth for the glory of your name. Amen. So in the book of John, chapter 18, 33 to 38, listen what it says. Just some context, Jesus has been arrested unfairly, he's been tried, and people are trying to get him crucified, so the Jews eventually bring him to a guy named Pilate. Pilate eventually kicked him out to go speak to somebody else. That somebody said he couldn't find anything wrong with him, so he brings him back to Pilate. And so Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, then I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not of this world." Then Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say I'm a king. For this purpose I was born. For this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." And Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" And after he said this, he went back outside to the Jews. Pilate's question, "What is truth?" sounds so simple, but is so profoundly difficult to answer. It is so intricately complex that people have been speaking about this for decades upon centuries, and actually for millennia. And it's ironic, obviously, for Pilate, because as Christians we believe and we know that he was staring the answer to his question directly in the eyes. Pilate asks this question, "What is truth?" And he's looking at truth incarnate. And before he even gets the answer or stands around to get the answer, he does the biggest sin possible in that moment, and he turns his back and walks away. The only one who could have satisfactorily answered the question for him was Jesus himself. But Pilate turned and walked. And the reason why Pilate turned and walked was because he was a cynic. He was cynical about truth. He didn't believe that absolute truth existed. And so when he asks the question of Jesus, "What is truth?" he doesn't actually want an answer. He's making a statement. He hears Jesus say that he is the truth, and he's able to offer truth. And he looks at Jesus and goes, "What is truth?" In other words, truth doesn't exist. There's no such thing as truth. And so he turns his back and he walks out. We live in a world that shares the same view and belief on truth as Pilate did. We live in a world that so desperately needs to hear the fact that there is absolute truth, but as Christians sometimes we don't know how to communicate with people because I'm not too sure that we're convinced absolute truth exists. So I just want to take some time before we move on to just clarify a few things. 3 things actually. I want to just speak quickly about the nature of truth. What is truth like? Right? So the nature of truth, then I want to unpack what the difference is between subjective truth and absolute truth, and then bring a definition, right, for the type of truth we're going to be speaking about tonight. So we're going to speak about the nature of truth, the difference between subjective truth and absolute truth, and then bring a definition. Right? So just bear with me here. Right, so quickly, the nature of truth. What is truth like? Right? Number 1, truth is propositional. That's just a fancy way of saying truth can be put into words, phrases, and sentences. It can be spoken or written down. Right? There's no ways that you can know it is true that this is a glass of water unless I'm able to tell you this is a glass of water. All right? Obviously, you can see it, but if I can't tell you what it is, we can't have a discussion about it, so we don't know what's true about it. Truth has to be able to be put into words, phrases, and sentences for it to be true, whether it's spoken or written down. The second thing is truth is non-contradictory. Truth doesn't contradict itself. Right? So I can't say to you tonight, this is a glass of water, but it's not a glass of water. That would contradict itself. It wouldn't be true. It can't be both things. It can't be a glass of water and not a glass of water. It is what it is. Right? Which leads to the next thing about the nature of truth. Truth is exclusive by nature. In other words, if I say 2 + 2 = 4, I'm excluding the possibility that it's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 5,551.2. All right? Truth by nature is exclusive. 1 + 1 is 2. That's it. That's the truth about that mathematical sum. You can't change that. It's exclusive. It excludes the opposite. If I say to you, the capital of South Africa is Pretoria, I would be right, hopefully. Right? I'm excluding the possibility that it's Johannesburg or Paris or Cape Town. So truth by nature is exclusive. Right? I hope that makes sense. Now, when it comes to subjective truth and absolute truth, they're similar but also completely, distinctly different. Right? Subjective truth would be truth that is not true for all people at all times. And it could change. And it could change based on a person's opinion, based on their preference, based on their circumstances. Right? Based on their choice. Here's an example of legitimate subjective truth, right? Subjective truth that's okay. Let's just say myself and Justin went out for a milkshake, right? And we sat down at, Cafe Royale, all right? They got the best milkshakes in town, right? We sat down there, and Justin ordered a chocolate milkshake, and I ordered a strawberry one, right? And we spoke about our favorite flavors of milkshake. And I said, my favorite flavor is strawberry, and Justin said, my favorite flavor is chocolate. It would be true that my favorite flavor is strawberry, and true that his is chocolate. My truth is not his truth. Right? It's subjective. And then it could change a month later. Mine could be lime. And it was that before I was a teenager. I know that's weird, but it was. Right? But that's subjective truth. Right? And I've got a little picture here, which came up very quickly. This is subjective truth. These people are standing, right? And the one person's perspective tells him that this is a 9, and the other person's perspective tells him that this is a 6. Right? So the guy goes 9, the other guy goes no 6. In this situation, they're both right. That's subjective truth. Right? But there's limits to subjective truth, because I can go and drink as much strawberry milkshake as I want, and it will only really affect me and my bank account. Right? But it's not really going to harm anybody. Subjective truth becomes a massive issue when you start to apply it to issues of morality. In other words, what's right and wrong in this world? Do we murder or don't we? Who goes to jail and why do they go to jail? And it becomes a massive issue when you start to answer questions like, where do I come from? What's the meaning of life? Why am I here? Do I have value? What is the difference between right and wrong, and where do I go after this life? Subjective truth becomes dangerous in those areas because not everybody can be right, which is where absolute truth comes in. The difference between subjective truth and absolute truth is this, that absolute truth is truth that is true for all people at all times and does not change for anything. Right? So to go back to the picture which I edited, right? Subjectively, you'd be able to say, just because you are right doesn't mean I'm wrong, and subjectively, that's true. Right? One saw 6, the other one saw 9. But, there are cases where you could say, someone wrote that number down. One of those guys is wrong. Someone intended it to be a 6 or a 9. And subjective truth becomes dangerous when there is a building on fire, and the fireman goes, which number is it? And the guy goes, it's number 9. And they get there, and the guy goes, no, this is 9. He goes, no, it's 6. Right? Fireman ends up at the wrong house or at the right house, you don't know. So you need to be able to orientate yourself with something that's outside of you. So you look for maybe a number sequence in the road. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, 6 is missing. Or we're standing where 6 would be. That must mean this is 6 and not a 9. Or someone who painted the road comes and says, hey, I intended for that to be a 9. I painted it there, it is a 9. You guys are arguing about whether this is a 6 or a 9. I painted it, it's a 9. I'm telling you it's 9. So in that case, someone is wrong. Right? That would be an absolute truth. Another absolute truth would be you and I discussing what would happen to Brad and I if we stood on the stage, or let's make it the balcony, because that heightens the stakes. And we were arguing about what would happen to us if we had to jump off. All right? Brad says he's going to fall. I go, we're super spiritual, we're going to float. All right? We can argue for as long as we want about what's going to happen, but one of you who's clever would come and go, hey guys, I'm just going to draw your attention to something outside of you. It's called the law of gravity. Right? Isaac Newton discovered it. It was always there. He just helped us to put it into words. The absolute truth about that is if you jump off, you're going to hit the ground, both of you. One of you is right, one of you is wrong, because there's something outside of you that dictates what's going to happen. That's an absolute truth for all of us. So that's the difference between absolute truth and subjective truth. Right now, a definition. And I just want to highlight this. This definition is going to carry us through this message. Right? So when I speak about truth, if I don't say absolute truth, I mean absolute truth. Truth that's true for all people at all times in all places, no matter what, and never changes. The best definition I could come up with for absolute truth is this. Absolute truth is that which affirms with words, phrases, and sentences reality as it is, and is true at all times, in all places, for all people, and does not change whether we like it or not. Right? That's the definition we're going to go with tonight. Now, coming back to Pilate, it's probably unfair to say of this poor guy that he didn't believe in any truth at all when he said to Jesus, "What is truth?" and walked away. Right? He probably believed stuff like gravity, right, would have an effect on him if he jumped off a building. He probably believed the truth that Caesar was Caesar and he was second, and under Caesar he wasn't Caesar himself. He believed those truths. He believed certain absolute truths about the natural world and subjective truths. He understood that. So why did Pilate, when he heard Jesus say, I come to bear witness to the truth, turn around and say, what is truth? It's because when Jesus said that to him, Pilate understood that Jesus was saying, I have absolute truth to the answers that are at the heart, I have the answers that are absolute truth, that will speak to the fundamental questions that we as human beings ask. Like, where do we come from? Why are we here? What's right? What's wrong? And where do I go afterwards? See, Pilate had a sense that Jesus was saying he was going to offer him an absolute truth and was going to be able to bear witness to an absolute truth. And he sees this in Jesus and is cynical about that and doubts it and doesn't believe it and so walks away. And so in that sense, when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, what Jesus is saying is that he is the absolute truth, the truth that doesn't change for anybody at any time, for any reason, to where we come from, what's good and what's bad, what the meaning to life is, and where do we go after this. Jesus is saying he is the truth, full answer to all of those questions. But Pilate's cynicism and his question, with its attitude and doubt, has filtered down through the generations and has filtered down through history. So much so that we get to a place now where we have a generation and generations of people asking the same question. But it's morphed and it's grown and it's become something even more than Pilate asked, because Pilate may have still been seeking. We've got to a place where we live in a world that's so relative, people have come up with the idea that truth itself at all doesn't exist. And at best, it's subjective and never absolute. And therefore the mantra, you may have heard this word postmodern, after the modern era, the postmodern mantra, the world that we live in is, there is no such thing as truth. And that worldview is called relativism. Right? The view that people have about the world is called relativism. In other words, your truth for where we come from, why we're here, what's right and what's wrong, and where we're going after this life is dependent on you. You can make it up and it's fine. And we can completely disagree. We can have completely conflicting ideas about the answers to those questions, and we can both be right. That's relativism. Truth comes from within you. So we live in a world that's attacked and is attacking the idea of absolute truth from all sides. So much so that the great philosopher who's still alive, Os Guinness, a Christian guy, great to listen to, he says that as a Christian, to stand for truth and to be a people of absolute truth is becoming a revolutionary act. Right? Because we're told constantly that truth can change, because we're told constantly that it's relative, that we have no right to say otherwise, because if we say you're wrong and there is a truth that is right, we get called narrow-minded, we get called bigoted, we get called intolerant and oppressive and exclusive. I don't know if you've heard Christians being labeled like that, or anybody who holds to a worldview that's exclusive, like a Muslim or a Jew. They get told that they're narrow-minded because they have exclusive views about the answers to life's fundamental questions. And what this has done for the Christian, and I've had to wrestle through this, is it's made us back off from the Great Commission. We tend to be scared and not take on Jesus' command to us, go out and preach the gospel, preach the good news of the kingdom, because we all of a sudden feel like we're being oppressive if we do that. Because how can I be intolerant of someone else's view? How can I be, exclusive about this? It is true for me, but is it really true for them? And so we tend not to want to force ourselves onto people for fear of being called narrow-minded and exclusive, because we don't want to offend people. And it's not about offending people. It's about whether you believe this thing being absolutely true or not. And if it's absolutely true, it's true for everybody, at all times, in all places. And it's a massive tactic of the enemy, not just because it's got Christians stuck in the mud, but because it's created a world where every religion is right, So when we come and we share the gospel of Jesus, it just gets seen as another one of those things in this like quagmire of beliefs. It's created a world where every behavior is acceptable and no one's wrong no matter what they believe or do. According to this world's version of truth, we can't even know someone's gender without first asking them what they believe they are. Right? I'm being serious. You can't assume someone's male or female without asking them first what they believe they are. Because what they believe is what they are is truth. Because it's subjective. We've created a world where we can say things like love wins. And we can teach our children that there's no real negative consequences to bad decisions because there's no such thing as a bad decision. If you decided to do it, it's good because you decided that it was good. There's no such thing as right or wrong. We can turn marriage into whatever we want it to be. And we can come up with whatever theory we want about where we come from, why we're here, what's right and what's wrong, and where we go after this, no matter how twisted and convoluted and difficult it is to understand and how contradictory it is. We can just come up with whatever we want. And we can both be wrong, and we can both be right, no matter how contradictory they are, as long as we don't tell each other, hey, this is wrong. And it's accepted. In other words, we live in a whatever world, whatever goes. And that's a challenge that we're facing. I hear it more and more with guys who I'm friends with who study at varsity. I see it more and more in the lives of our teenagers being involved in youth ministry. This is a challenge for them. People are saying, you can't force that on me. How do you know it's true? This isn't true. There's no such thing as truth. It's subjective. What's true for me might not be true for you, so don't force your opinion on me. And so we get forced into this corner where we can't preach the gospel with confidence. There's a quote by a guy named Andrei Sagorov, and I'll be impressed if you know who he was or who he is. Anybody know? He was the guy who gave the Russians the nuclear bomb. Right? And so this is what he says. He says, I've always thought that the most powerful weapon in the world was the bomb. And that's why I gave it to my people. But I've come to the conclusion throughout my life that the most powerful weapon in the world is not the bomb, but it's the truth. That's what the guy who gave the Russians the nuclear weapon said towards the end of his life. That I wanted to give people the most powerful weapon I knew how to give them, and I should have given them the truth instead of a nuclear bomb. That's an amazing statement from a guy who didn't know Jesus. So the big question is, how do we engage with a postmodern relativistic world and minister the absolute truth of Jesus into the hearts and lives of people who so desperately need it? They may not know it, but we know that they do. And that's not arrogance from our side, because we didn't get the truth we have from within us. We knew it came from Jesus. We know it came from outside of us to us, and we just believed it because it changed our lives. And I want to say, I think we need to begin, like it says in 1 Peter, with love, with gentleness, and with respect, and with compassion for people. Not trying to cause an argument or have a fight for having an argument's sake. And I think there are people out there that just want to sound clever, they just want to debate, and they just want to have an argument. This is about winning people for the kingdom. This isn't about being clever. This isn't about being right. And I think we have to put our pride and our selfish intentions aside and love people. And I love this quote from a guy named Rabbi Zacharias. He said, we need to treat people with such respect, and we need to engage with them around a table and put ideas against ideas. We need to be able to do that. People offend people. Ideas don't offend ideas. Let's sit around a table and put our ideas on the table, and let's see which idea wins. And don't be arrogant about it. Let's love each other and be open to your idea being wrong. And the great thing and the beauty about being a Christian is you know that if God's truth is God's truth, you don't have to worry, God's word says, about the words you're going to use, because He will give them to you as you have a discussion with people about what's right and what's not. So we need to treat people with love, and we need to engage the relativistic world and a postmodern person who believes that all truth is subjective by showing them how contradictory and self-destructive that worldview is. Right? We need to show them why truth is important, and then most of all, if we're able to get them to that place, we need to point them to Jesus. Not to us, not to a textbook, but to the Bible and to the person of Jesus. And I just want to say, the person must be willing. You can't take them by the collar and drag them to sit and have a conversation with you. And you'll be able to discern whether the person you're chatting to might have come up to you is antagonistic or genuinely seeking and wanting to hear from you. If they're not genuinely wanting to, you're going to get yourself into an argument, and you're going to be throwing, as God's word says, pearl to swine. There's a quote by a guy named George MacDonald. He said, To give truth to him who loves it not is only to give him more multiplied reason for misinterpretation. To give truth to him who loves it not is only to give him more multiplied reason for misinterpretation. So if you're having a conversation with somebody who doesn't actually want to hear anything you have to say, and is not open to seeking truth, all you're going to be doing is giving him more weapons to fight you back with and misinterpret stuff and walk away more confused and you more frustrated than anything else. So you have to have someone who's willing. So firstly, why is this worldview contradictory? Well, because relativism believes that there's no such thing as absolute truth. However, those who insist that absolute truth does not exist only really believe it doesn't exist in 4 areas: sex, sexuality, morality, and religion. That's honestly where they truly believe it doesn't exist. Because when it comes to the absolute truths of science and mathematics and physics, you would be hard-pressed to find a relativist. Someone once said, who was a relativist and didn't believe in absolute truth but was a scientist, when he was questioned about that, said, well, all I can really say to you is that I'm an absolutist in my workplace and a relativist in my social life. That's what he said. You'd be hard-pressed to find someone who believed in subjective truth speaking to the engineer of an aeroplane and asking him, hey, did you calculate properly the forces that are going to be at work on that aeroplane wing? You would be hard-pressed to find him step onto the plane if the other relativist said, no, I just threw a few numbers together, sort of worked it out, and I believe it's true. The guy's going to be like, did you not abide by the absolute truths of science, mathematics, and physics? No, because it's subjective. Yeah. I don't know. I wouldn't get onto that aeroplane. Right? So one cannot say they don't believe in absolute truths and then reserve the right to apply that belief wherever they want. You can't do that. And so some people in that worldview have noted this and they've done a sidestep and they've moved into a place called scientific positivism. Right? Which is a massive word for saying, I'm going to accept absolute truths, but the only ones I'm going to accept are the ones that science can prove. Here's the problem with that. When they say the only truths that are absolutely true can be proved by science, they're making an absolutely true statement. Right? So they're saying it's absolutely true that science proves truth. The problem is you can't use science to prove their statement. Their statement is, all truth must be scientifically proved. How do you scientifically prove that? You can't. And so their worldview deconstructs, right? Even though they've taken a sidestep and said, okay, fine, there is absolute truth in the area of science, physics, and mathematics. Secondly, relativism as a worldview philosophically self-destructs. And a lot of these guys are just verbal gymnastics, right? And that's what philosophy really is. It's just being able to be clever with words and make it sound better than what it really is. But those who tell you that to believe in an absolute truth is narrow-minded, right? And to believe in absolute truth is exclusive, have got tons of explaining to do, because similar to the scientific positivists, when they say there is no such thing as absolute truth, right? They're making a statement which they believe to be absolutely true. There's no such thing as absolute truth. Okay, do you believe that that is true? Yes. You've just disproved yourself and your theory and your worldview caves in on itself. If they say, no, I don't believe it's true, well then relativism is not true. You can't defend it. And very seldom people don't take the time to think about the stuff they say that they believe, because it just sounds good. And it frees their conscience to go and do whatever it is that they want to do. And that's why a guy by the name of Art Lindsay, I told you about in the beginning, said that relativism is just an opioid for the conscience. It's just a painkiller for the conscience. It's not really something that's livable. And finally, thirdly, relativism is my point next, that is totally unlivable in the real world. Right? Let's just take a relativist crossing the road. Right? He stands on the side of the road and he does look both ways, right? and doesn't walk into the road when a car's coming because he believes it's absolutely true that it's either him or the car. It's not both and. It's not a subjective thing. So relativism as an idea might sound great, but it's not livable in the real world. Or take this example. I was listening to Rabbi Zacharias preaching about a time when he went to a country and he was on an aeroplane back from that country and he was sitting next to a woman and they got chatting and he found out that she was a Christian and she was there to rescue young babies out of the sex trade. Right? And she said, "You will never believe what happened. I rescued an 18-month-old baby out of the arms of a man who was sexually abusing her." And this guy was high and drunk on a mixture of hard alcohol and snake's blood. And so he went there, a businessman, he went there after the day's work and he got drunk on this concoction and then they brought this 18-month-old baby to him and gave it to him and he raped her. Now, everything inside of us goes, "Ah, that is terrible." If you're a relativist, you cannot say that child abuse is evil. All you're able to say is, "That's just not my thing." Because if you're a relativist, it's true for him that that's okay. Where do you get your fixed point for morality from? You can't accuse him of it being wrong. All you can do is say, "I just get my truth from a different place and that's just not my thing." But that makes us cringe, right? Makes us go, surely. And we know that that cringe factor happens for everybody, no matter where they're at. Why? Because in Romans 2:15 it says, "They show that the work of the law, God's law, is written on their hearts, while their consciences also bear witness, and their conflicting thoughts accuse them, even excuse them." What that is saying is that God has written His laws on our hearts, and He's our fixed point for absolute truth. He's the one we go to. Someone who believes in a relativistic worldview has to admit that there's no such thing as evil, and they can't be disappointed when women are being sold into slavery, sex slavery, and abused. They just have to go, "It's okay, it's just not my thing." That's unlivable. The next thing to do, in my opinion, is if you get them to a place where they're listening, is to highlight the importance of truth in all areas of life. And I might ask you, so why is truth important? Well, simply because life has got consequences. You're making the wrong decisions. You take the wrong medicine, you're possibly going to die. You give the person the wrong dose of the wrong medicine, or even the right medicine, you get it wrong, they're going to die. You get on the wrong plane, you want to head to Joburg, you get on the wrong plane, not that you could, maybe you could, I don't know. You're going to end up in the wrong place. You give a wrong maths answer in a test. Your teacher gives you a couple of maths questions, and one of them is, 1 + 1 =, and you say 5, you're going to fail. There's consequences. If you're unfaithful in your marriage, you're going to wreck your family and possibly have your marriage end in divorce. Right? Or this story about a guy who walked into a courtroom and was watching a court case unfold, and there were 2 little girls who were accusing a man of raping them. And they weren't in the courtroom, they were just being cameraed, and you could hear their voices. And not the defense lawyer, the prosecutor got up and started to ask this guy and these little girls questions. And at the end of his story, you felt really a bunch of animosity towards this guy. But then the defense lawyer got up and he said this to the little girls. He said, "I'm not here to scare you. I'm not here to accuse you of anything. I just want to ask you a few questions. If you don't understand what I'm saying, just ask me to repeat the question. But all I want from you is the truth. I don't want you to lie to me or make anything up. Just tell me the truth." And he started a series of questions, and he asked these little girls, is it true that it took you 2 months to tell your mom and dad about what had happened? They're like, "Yes, it is." And you can understand why, if it really happened. There's a whole bunch of extenuating circumstances that make them feel awkward about it. But then he had a follow-up question, and the question was, is it true that on the day you accused this man of raping you, you were at a place that your mom and dad told you not to be, and he saw you there, and he said that he's going to take you to your mom and dad and tell them that, hey, he found you there? And they were like, we can't remember, and we don't know. And the guy who was telling me the story, or the guy I was listening to was telling the story, he just said, all of a sudden when you left the courtroom, you didn't know what was true all of a sudden. He said truth in that moment all of a sudden became so important to him, because if he did rape those little girls, then justice needs to be served. And if he didn't, then this man needs to be acquitted and set free. And that's just a courtroom case, an example. Rabbi Zechariah says this: the fact is that truth matters, especially when you're on the receiving end of a lie. And nowhere is this more important in the area of faith and religion, because eternity is a heck of a long time to have got it wrong. He says, Romans 1:18-32 says, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world. In the things that have been made, you can see God. So they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking and foolish, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man, and birds and animals and creeping things. Therefore God gave them up in the lusts of their hearts, to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies amongst themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason God gave them up to dishonorable passions. For the women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature. And the men likewise gave up natural relations with women, and were consumed with passion for one another, men committing shameless acts with men, and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind, to do what ought not to have been done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Though they know God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. God is going to be pouring out his wrath on people who suppress his truth. And by suppressing his truth, the consequences are you'll end up in a place where you are broken, sexually immoral, face all sorts of consequences that are negative to you as a human being, and ultimately end up in eternal punishment. For those who suppress the truth and don't want it, there's a quote by a guy named Aldous Huxley. He said, blasphemously, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you mad. Because people described in this passage of Scripture don't want to know truth. And so when they see truth and they find it, it's like salt being poured into a wound when you don't want it to be there. It burns. Or it's like coming out of a dark room and having a bright light shined in your eyes. If you don't want to come out into the light, you don't want to put up with that. And so to find the truth makes you mad. You gnash your teeth. And you end up ultimately actually losing your mind. I want to move on here quickly. Finally, if you ever get the honor, I'm going to end off with this tonight. If you ever get the honor of walking a road with somebody that was a subjectivist and didn't believe that absolute truth existed, and they reach a point where they finally acknowledge the importance of truth and the need for it in their lives and desire to find it, you need to help them to see and to discover ultimate truth. But they have to understand that they're aiming to discover something that's beyond themselves. They're aiming to discover something that transcends us and culture and individual preference, something that's beyond and quite literally outside of this world. You have to have them understand that they're actually looking for God, and then you point them to Jesus. For the whole world, not just the Christian, the ultimate expression of truth is found in the person of Jesus Christ, who said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus is the ultimate source of truth. He's the ultimate source of hope. He's the ultimate source of security. He's the ultimate source of guidance. And those who seek him will find him And instead of the truth making them mad, Jesus says, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. The truth will set you free. I heard this beautiful message preached by Ravi Zacharias, and he was speaking about people desiring truth, and he said there's this time where these people try to trick Jesus into confessing that you either had to or didn't have to pay your taxes. And they didn't really want the truth, they just wanted to trap him. So they had a whole bunch of these Roman officials around. The older Jewish religious guys sent the younger Jewish religious guys to go and ask Jesus this question. And so there's this massive crowd, and Jesus is put on the spot, and he seems like he's backed into a corner. And they say, Jesus, the young Jewish guys, they go, hey, Jesus, should we pay our taxes? And Jesus goes, give me a coin. Right now, this is a really tense moment, because if Jesus says, no, you shouldn't pay your taxes, the Romans are going to arrest him and chuck him in jail. Right? And if he says, yes, you should, he's going to be accused of going against his people and being a coward and a wimp and just bowing to the Roman officials and their desires. Because the Romans were oppressing the Jews at that time and demanding taxes from them that were exorbitant and unrealistic. So Jesus is in this position, and he takes the coin. If you know the story, it's a marvelous response. They say, Jesus, should we pay our taxes? And Jesus looks at the coin and he says, whose inscription and whose image is engraved on this coin? And they say, Caesar's. And then Jesus says, well, then render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. And God's word says that they were blown away and that they were amazed at this, and it silenced them and they walked away. If they were there for the truth, they would have been happy with that answer, but they probably would have followed up with another one. And if they were happy with that answer, they would have followed up with another question. And the question would have been, if that's what we have to give to Caesar, what then belongs to God? And Jesus probably would have said to them, whose image is engraved on you? When I heard that, I was like, oh. Because we are created in the image of the living God, and his image is engraved on us. And he breathed into us the breath of life. And if that is true, it is true for everyone. And we have a broken and desperate world who needs to know that there's a creator God who's made them and loves them. And they are being led astray by empty and hollow philosophies. And the consequences to their decisions are going to be dire. We need to point them in the direction of Jesus and love them and be confident that what we profess to be true, because we've seen it in Jesus, is the absolute truth. And if it is, then Jesus truly is the only way, because truth is exclusive. It excludes the others. That's us tonight. I want to encourage you, church. Go do some reading. Go do some research. Pray and ask God for wisdom and for courage and boldness. You carry in you the light of Jesus, the hope of glory. The power of the Spirit of God is in you to bring good news to people. You cannot back off and think that what you believe is subjective and that other people can't get it, because if what you believe is true and they don't know Jesus, they are going to hell. We need to be confident that it's the truth, and we need to honor God by living out lives that speak about our confidence. That's what Jesus deserves. We're not arrogant. We're not narrow-minded. We're exclusive, but we should rejoice that there's only one way and not 50 billion. We should rejoice and be happy to bring that to people. Let's pray. Father, I just want to thank you for your word. I want to thank you for the fact that absolute truth exists and it is seen in the face of Jesus. Your word is truth, and I pray that you would sanctify us with your word. Give us boldness and courage. And I want to pray this prayer over people who are going, yes, please, Jesus, I need more boldness. Lord, fill us with your Spirit to overflowing with boldness and courage, and may we know the hope that we profess. And may we run this race with perseverance, bringing as many people as possible along with us for the journey, pointing them towards you. May we not bow the knee to a world that says there's no such thing as absolute truth and be silenced and mummed. I pray, God, that you would help us to speak out as your people and to celebrate truth, to dance and to be with joy overflowing in the presence of Jesus and in the presence of people. For the glory of your name. Amen.